What's the plan for today?
Well, we've got...
Assume we're just recapping the entire time, recapping that sensational Blades versus Aspinall card.
Yeah. I figure first... I don't know, I mean, what sounds reasonable? First 40 minutes?
Figure that just the whole thing. And then 277 can all be bonus. People want in-depth analysis of Ahmed Mukayev versus Charles Johnson and Mark Diakiese, Damir Hadzovic.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you give me a sample of that?
I fast-forwarded through those fights quite a lot, I'm not gonna lie.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I'm Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie. Phil, how are you?
Good. I'm hyped.
Yeah, well, so am I, obviously. I'm either hyped or an ant just bit my foot. It was
one of the two.
A yelp of some kind. There was some strong emotion in that introduction. Why are you hyped, Phil?
Because we have an awesome rematch to look forward to.
Awesome is an understatement. You know? Even in the old sense, awesome used to be a thing you would use to describe a natural disaster. The sight of the Persian army approaching Thermopylae, an awesome sight. My God.
This is a rematch to a fight which expanded the boundaries of reality and what you thought was possible.
Yeah. Somehow
we get a fight like that.
All of humanity was leading up to the first fight between current women's bantamweight champion, Juliana Pena, and former
That's
champion.
a funny thing to say.
Former champion, current loser, Amanda Nunes. And now we have the rematch scheduled for next weekend at UFC 277. I am truly very excited. I have honestly been looking forward to this for like 3 weeks. Which is not something I usually get to say about a bad fight. But I really need the next chapter to this epic story. Yeah. So that's what we're going to talk about. We've also got in this card, Brandon Moreno, Kai Kara France. Awesome. I think that's for an interim title, right? Yeah.
Completely meaningless interim title?
Yeah. It's whatever. There's only like 8 dudes in the division, but I guess Figueiredo's doing something. We've got Alexandre Pantoja versus Alex Perez. 2 great flyweight fights on this main card. So they're really not trying to sell any tickets here. And Anthony Smith, Magomed Ankalaev, a couple other ones as well. And then it really kind of falls off hard when you get to the prelims, the early prelims. But great main card, an incredible main event of a kind that is like no other great main event. And I think that describes the first fight, Phil. 'Cause it was epic. Like, in the actual sense of the word, it was. Like, what a stunning comeback. Mm-hmm. What an incredible upset. What courage, what tenacity. These are all the things we really want to see in a great fight. And I would call it a great fight. But at the same time, it was a comically terrible fight. And I really...
It's one of the funniest fucking fights I've ever seen.
Right? Like, Holm Rousey, was another fight like that comes to mind. Was funny in that, you had by that time plenty of reason to dislike Ronda Rousey and her behavior in the lead up to that match. And so that's like the sort of comedic element. But it's nothing really funny about how the fight plays out. She really just kind of gets outclassed.
There are certain, like, pretty comedic bits, like when she
throws the
charges.
Yeah.
she charges home and kind of runs into the fence.
Yeah, that is pretty funny. Okay, to be fair. But nothing like this. I've never seen a fight that was that level of hugely meaningful upset and was also so dumb. Just so dumb. Dumb in a way. By the way, another layer to this fight. This is why I'm so excited. It's so multifaceted. Dumb in exactly the way I would like it to be dumb, because still the most remarkable thing. Like, Juliana Peña's not a clever fighter. She's not a nuanced fighter. And that should be a lesson to every other MMA fighter on the planet. Even Juliana Peña can beat Amanda Nunes with literally nothing but a slip jab. So it was a stupid fight that was still decided on in like a very principled way that I would love to see determine more fights. There's so many aspects to it that just, there's no other fight like it.
Yeah, I mean, because it asks, and so why the rematch is so compelling is because it asks an incredibly silly question.
Yeah.
It's just like, can you deal with this one technique, Amanda Nunes? And she didn't deal with it at all throughout the entirety of that fight.
The answer's not entirely clear.
So yeah, you're just like, so what if she does something else? What if Amanda Nunes has spent her entire camp? She's moved away from ATT, I believe. Started her own. I think she's basically started her own camp.
Okay.
I don't know if they've got just like a backboard with like a picture of stick person throwing a dipping jab and then like a series of equations around it, or just like kind of sitting around there wondering how to solve it. Yeah, I mean that's the question. Is that you got to ask? She solve the question? Because sometimes people don't.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, former Laugh Out Loud Fighter of the Year, Cody Garbrandt, you know, most famously, had the same goddamn fight 3 times in a row.
Yeah. And
yes, I think
go on.
A friend of the show, Dan Albert, I think, posted a GIF of the fight, which is just awesome. That Peña lunges in with a jab, and tries to uppercut her and completely misses, and the jab misses as well from Peña. But she then uses it as a frame on Nunes' face to launch her own right hand, then just punches herself clean in her own wrist. just awesome.
Oh boy. There's nothing like it. Every image of like Peña like fainting, you know, the sort of like she's fainting with such intensity it feels like all her bones are going to fall apart at any moment. She's going to like rattle herself apart like a bridge with an army marching over it. Just should hit the resonance frequency with all this herky jerky fainting. Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, so here's my concern, and we will talk about how we think this is going to play out. We're going to have to come up with some answer. God knows we're good at that. We made some incredible predictions last week. Which you're going to have to, this is the other advantage of having all these good fights on this main card, is that if you want to hear us eat a little crow, you're going to have to pay $3. It's gonna be on the Patreon. We don't have to admit we were wrong about anything until that sweet bonus episode, that wonderful privacy. But
do that every time.
We really should.
Every time we get something wrong, no matter how big it is, we should just go straight into the bonus archive.
I mean, the shame is that breaking down fights after the fact is and has always been my favorite thing to do. So, I love eating some good crow and trying to understand why I was so stupid. But, you're going to have to pay $3. Here's my concern, Phil. We've seen Amanda Nunes react to opponents who have overwhelmed her in a state of exhaustion somewhat later in the fight. Again, this fight is still so special and unique because that point arrived 6 minutes in. But we have seen her respond to, say, Valentina Shevchenko, who she exhausted herself beating up and then got tired, and really got thrashed in the third round. And if only Valentina Shevchenko were literally any other fighter, probably would have gotten finished. I mean, literally, if she was Juliana Pena, she would have finished her. And her response to that in the rematch was to have the most boring fight of all time. So, is that a possibility here? That's my concern.
100%.
Can she? This is the other question. You know you can have the most boring fight of all time if the opponent who you forced to beat you up last time is Valentina Shevchenko. Can you have the most boring fight of all time against Juliana Pena? And I think that's the saving grace here. I don't think it's going to be easy to have a boring fight.
Do you think?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so this is one of the things is that, you know, before the fight we were saying that Juliana Pena had kind of abandoned her old insane aggression a little bit. Hadn't been, you know, nearly as much in evidence in her basically her fight since she came back from, you know, that maternity layoff.
Right.
So, the question is, does championship Juliana Pena also look any different? It might be someone that you trust to just be crazy all the time, but she's actually like, no, I've got the belt now. Now I need to fight technical.
Ooh, that's a terrifying thought.
Terrifying thought.
Yeah, because the thing is that in the first fight, she wasn't insanely aggressive at first, and things went horribly, horribly wrong for Juliana Pena in basically every way they could. And this was a magical fight where both fighters were taken back to an earlier time in their careers, where it was the most classic Amanda Nunes defeat you could ever ask for. And round 2, it was classic Juliana Pena. All out aggression, just insane, balls to the wall, constantly swarming and trading shots. So yeah, is the concern then that if Nunes prevents herself from beating Pena up again, which again, it has to be understood that she can pretty much do that whenever she wants. If she doesn't do that, can Pena work up the nerve to make it a fight? Yeah, that's an interesting problem. Interesting in that it will be very boring.
Yeah, it really could be. Even then, it will still be pretty funny.
Yeah,
to a certain point. If there's like if there's been like 15 minutes of Amanda Nunes low kicking Juliana Pena, and then like clinching and then disengaging when Pena gets close to her, then it will start to wear a little by then, I feel. So if things are going super badly for Juliana Pena, I do trust her to go nuts again.
I think so. Even if they're going badly in the sense of the fight is very boring and she's just not being given any openings, I think she will reach a point where because every time she gets picked apart, I mean, Nunes is still going to have to do something to win the fight. It's going to piss Juliana off. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
She's just eternally mad. So yeah, I think it may take a while. It might start boring, but it will have to be the first fight again at some point. At least shades of it. How crazy is it that Juliana Pena, with her weird middling record, has beaten 3 of the greatest champions in women's MMA history? She obviously beat Valentina. Just easily out-wrestled her, and that fight mysteriously ended shortly before the end of the second round. No one knows why. She beat Amanda Nunes very clearly. And Nico Montano.
Yes, I forgot about that one.
So did everyone else.
Yeah, EDR is just that good, I guess.
Uh-huh.
That good of a grappler. This division doesn't make any sense.
It really doesn't. Yeah. She got absolutely tuned up in that GDR fight. That should be something of which Amanda Nunes is more than capable of replicating that kind of performance, because GDR mostly fought her in open space and off the back foot, and mostly countered her. Just picked her apart, and, had a reach advantage. She landed jabs. She kept her moving. She made Pena reset her feet constantly, and then just kept beating her with the right hand every time she let her jab go.
Nunes could literally... I mean, it was the fact that Nunes just threw every single time that they were in the pocket. If Nunes just feinted to draw out the dip jab and then countered the dip jab.
Yeah. It should be really easy, because Pena's form is so bad.
Aside from the whole, aside from any queries about, 5 rounds and whether Nunes' cardio can hold up, I would be almost convinced that if she wanted to do that, she could simply out-wrestle Pena.
Yeah.
Sarah McMahon was, as far as I remember, also winning that fight quite handily.
Yeah. She was.
Until she, did what Sarah McMahon does.
It was part of what exhausted her, I think, in that first round, but was it really? I don't know. I mean, it was taxing. She did a lot of out-grappling of Pena in the first round. But she also tried to finish her, multiple times. And then just couldn't stop trading when they got into the exchanges. It should take such a small adjustment to win this. Such a small adjustment. I think feinting to draw out these hideous, while tactically effective, technically atrocious punches from Pena.
Then she could just either counterpunch or low kick her.
Yeah. At will.
And the other thing is just that you kind of get the impression from Nunes that she was, she's done it for long enough. Thing. I don't know if she's settling down with the family. I don't know if she's necessarily super keen with the idea of just having the target painted back on, having that target painted on her again and being the champion again.
Yeah. It was certainly the kind of finish where there was a sense of relief from the loser. Wasn't even a fully locked in choke. Just went down, exhausted. Didn't really seem to have that much motivation to fight out of it.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that makes it such a great rematch, because absolutely have to pick Amanda Nunes. So you're like, come on, it can't be that bad. But then you're like, can it? And you find yourself thinking, but it can't be.
Yeah.
And you watch the fight again and you just think, but can it? So many solutions she could take. Almost any path she could go down, she committed to it. And, would presumably have some kind of success. Maybe she just, maybe she's old enough, maybe she's kind of old enough and worn down enough that Juliana Pena can just revert her to old Amanda Nunes again. She just gets her in the clinch a bunch of times, and then by round 2 or 3, Nunes is knackered again, and we just get the Kat Zingano fight.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be outstriking. It could just be a truly classic Juliana Pena Amanda Nunes fight where she just Kat Zinganos her.
Yeah. In which you mean just thrashes her on the ground and then gets tired?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it ends the same way, it's going to be the funniest thing ever.
Yeah.
I actually genuinely like Amanda Nunes, but still.
And you don't. No one likes Pena.
Incredibly funny.
Pena is the first.
No one really likes Juliana Pena.
Pena's the first. At least I raised my kids champion in UFC history, where she's just you just know, immediately after this, she's gonna. The chip will not have been knocked off her shoulder, even if she defends the title. She's gonna go to a bar and get into a fight with some other mom. Immediately after this.
Her trainer was saying something. It wasn't Rick Little, was it?
No, I saw that somebody said that her trainer said something crazy, and I did watch that clip, and I was disappointed. I think it was
about they're gonna, if they step into the cage and try and see who's got the bigger ovaries.
Yeah. I think it was Mike Valley. I think she's at Valley Flow right now, right? Yeah, I was really excited for some sweet Rick Little content, but no, it wasn't Rick. I mean, I think honestly she could really use Rick Little in her corner for this fight. Enough of this Mike Valley trying to be good at striking bullshit. Just run forward and eat shots in order to get into a mess. I don't know. I mean, I do have concerns about Nunes's motivation. I think we've seen similar from her wife. She also just doesn't, they've got their little thing. They're comfortable. Amanda's really done it all. I mean, if anything could put a chip on your shoulder, it would be this, but it doesn't always work like that. Like if you've just dominated forever, sometimes you can't get it back. Not everyone's Jose Aldo. Where that reinvigorates their hunger, and then they decide after having talked about like retiring for 5 years, which that's the position Nunes was in. Aldo's like now like I'm never going to retire. Not everyone's like that. Most people aren't, even fighters. And it does seem inevitable that it's going to turn into a stupid mess. I think I might just pick Pena because it's so funny, and I do at least trust her to just be there to take a beating and keep trying to make a fight of it. And who else on Nunes's record really matches that description? Somebody who's like a decent enough grappler, not to not just be guaranteed to get submitted, though most of her losses are submissions. But can probably survive a few exchanges on the ground. Who's tough. I mean, her only stoppage by strikes is a doctor stoppage. Who's durable and who just scraps like a maniac, like somebody whose kids were just insulted by another mom at the soccer game. I'm going to pick Pena to retain.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very tempted to join you just for the mental thing. Like, yeah, I just feel like so much of Nunes's career was protecting herself from that breaking again.
Yeah,
that she used to do with some degree of consistency.
And as with all like corrective,
then it happened in such a tremendously, in such a public, definitive way.
Yeah.
Once you've been broken like that, do you rebuild? Do you want to rebuild? You have to really want it. And again, you look back at Pena and you can find. I mean, not only was she getting smoked in the early going of that fight, Nunes might just simply finish her.
Yeah.
Other than getting into any kind of trouble. You can go back and recent fights, just getting submitted by Jermaine Durandamy, long stretches of getting outstruck by Sarah McMahon.
Comical.
She hasn't. I mean, it's the baffling thing is she hasn't looked good, including in that fight, since her loss to Valentina Shevchenko. Yeah, I mean, so I guess I'll take Amanda Nunes just because she should be able to win almost in spite of herself.
Yeah, she should.
As I said, there's no. You can decide to counterpunch or low kick or even frankly probably out wrestle Pena, and any one of those singular options, should she commit to it, should work. And she's going to be presumably fucking her up right from the beginning of the fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm just going to pick Amanda Nunes, but yeah, I've got simultaneous trepidation and excitement.
I think the thing for me,
what you get from great fights.
Yeah, it is, and it is a great fight, a rematch of a great fight that is also terrible. It's a special series here, and I think, I mean, let's be clear, a major motivation for me to pick Pena is that it's just funny.
Oh yeah.
But in an actual logical, this is how a person who's good at predicting fights would predict them. I can do an impression of that type of person. And the thing that concerned me for Nunes about that first fight is it was the kind of loss which reveals very clearly, as you sort of hinted at before, that all the corrective action you've taken over the course of your career to paper over some pretty obvious flaws that just bit you again and again in the early stages of your career, that all of it was just a workaround. That you never actually addressed the core issues. And this is that's normal. Like, I talk about this all the time, that fighters usually, you lean into the stuff you're good at or you paper over your flaws, but it's just paper. You know, and the real reason I think it seems clearer than ever now that Nunes, you know, her cardio seemed better and all this, is that she just dragged her fights into a slower pace. And just didn't allow them to get crazy, and her opponents weren't able to make them crazy. And Pena is able to make it crazy. And if that's the flaw, like, now let's be clear, Nunes has won so many fights in her career that have got turned into crazy brawls because she's an exceptionally dangerous fighter. So that is not a death knell. Like, there's plenty of fights from that early stage when this was still just a glaring problem and she had no way around it, where the war would happen and she would still just smash her opponent. She's hugely powerful. She's a great submission grappler. She's absolutely devastating in top position. Probably has always been the best part of Nunes' game. All of these things could lead to a loss for Pena. Easily. They almost did. But, yeah, Pena is just like an insanely confident, self-possessed fighter who does not quit. And that is an essential quality in all the women that have beaten Amanda Nunes before. She's got Kat Zingano in her, you know?
Yeah, and I think based on that assessment, you know, the self-belief being the key ingredient, being someone who can survive on the floor and just push an advantage despite being technically and maybe physically outgunned on the feet.
Yeah.
I think, you know, based on that assessment, I think it really is time to start pushing that narrative that Amanda Nunes was just lucky she never had to fight Prime Betchko.
I mean, honestly, Betch would have probably gotten a somewhat tough fight at Amanda. Because
she probably would have got torched
she absolutely
inside of 2 rounds, but if she didn't...
100%, but she would have gotten some exchanges. It would have become a hairy fight.
Yeah.
Where the only problem is that she has literally like no power and is very slow. Yeah. And Pena has advantages over Betch in those regards, you know. She's got some power. She's reasonably athletic, despite the incredible awkwardness of her form. You know, she's reasonably fast and strong. So yeah, I'm going to take Pena. I do think there is a fundamental flaw there that just completely failed to appreciate the extent to which Pena can exploit that flaw. And with the understanding that exploiting that flaw is still an incredibly dangerous thing to do, even if you try to press that from the very beginning. I mean, perhaps especially then, because that's when Nunes is fresh and she might just kill you. I think it could go either way, but Pena's the funnier result, and I think there's more than enough reason to think she replicates that first fight. So why not?
I agree. It's one of those ones where everything technical says you just pick Amanda Nunes, but everything outside of that,
right,
says you pick Juliana Pena.
Once you enter the realm of the ovary measuring contest, then you have to consider Pena a serious contender. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, Brandon Moreno versus Kai Kara France. Alexandre Pantoja versus Alex Perez, Anthony Smith, Magomed Ankalaev, maybe. And that's almost certainly it. And again, I will remind you, if you want to hear our thoughts on the two Curtises and how expertly we predicted their fights, you should head over to our Patreon. That's there's going to be a big whopping bonus episode. And then just before the month is out, my plan, by the way, is to do a little boxing commentary. And I think I might make this a sort of series, an unofficial series, Phil, because the last boxing, like, classic fight commentary I did was Andre Ward, Chad Dawson, which is just like a clinical beatdown. And I have a hankering this time to do a classic commentary of Marco Antonio Barrera versus Nassim Hamed. Because that is another one where it's like somebody just comes in and just shows that with basic techniques and determination and discipline, you can beat a crazy, unorthodox fighter. So that has something to look forward to on the Patreon if the thought of us pretending that we picked the Chris Curtis fight correctly isn't enough to tempt you. Anyway, all of that on the Patreon, all the rest of UFC 277 after this. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. And welcome back to Heavy Hands. We move on now to the co-main event of UFC 277. That is a rematch, another rematch between Brandon Moreno and Kai Kara-France, this time for the extremely meaningful interim flyweight title. What is the explanation, by the way, for why Figueiredo's not defending his belt here, or why they made this fight instead?
Didn't he want more money?
Oh, they're doing that thing. Great.
They're doing that thing.
Awesome.
And now they're like, we have a champion, so we'll just strip you if you keep asking for, presumably... Yeah, I can't believe he's going to be asking for very much, to be honest.
Right, yeah.
Not within the context of what anyone else in boxing or another combat sport would get paid.
It's frustrating how difficult it is to find actual, reliable payouts. I would love to be able to complain about this kind of thing with facts, but yeah, I'm willing to bet that it's he wants $200K or something per fight. He probably $500,000 at most per fight. And probably not that much. Anyway, here we are.
Yes, they feel it's in their best interest to keep this kind of thing down, and in the same way that I think the Kevin Spacey cricket adequately explained in the Pixar film A Bug's Life. Don't let any of the fighters get big ideas. It's the general UFC premise.
The Kevin Spacey cricket in A Bug's Life. Did you watch this recently with a niece or something? Okay.
Something,
how do you
I saw
remember?
the clip gets posted on Twitter. He basically says, once one of them gets out of line, if they all get out of line, we're in serious trouble.
Right, okay. I would have referenced I don't know, Spartacus or something, when this dynamic sort of exists, but A Bug's Life, sure. So, what do you make of this? Here we are. The UFC's promotion machinations have given us an interim title fight between Moreno and Kai Kara-France, who fought once before in what really I thought was Brandon Moreno's coming out party. Where he just went in there and very exciting fight, very competitive, but also very clearly won by Brandon Moreno. It's about as one directional as a fight can be. Without it actually being dominant. Aside from, I think he got rattled in the first round. Aside from that, he was really just firing on all cylinders, fighting at a pace that Kara-France couldn't match, using his range, and then just agreeing to have exchanges with him, and making sure he had the last word whenever that had to happen. Classic Brandon Moreno performance as we now think of him, but first one of that.
Yeah, it's the first one where he really looked like a boxer.
Right.
And as such, even disregarding the legitimacy of the interim belt, one thing that we can be thankful for is that it's given. Basically, it's given Kai Kara-France the chance to be a 5-round fighter, because
there
are many fighters in many divisions that, despite being quite good, never get the Anthony Smith treatment, who is this time, relegated to just opening up the main card. just getting 5 rounds to work every time. Tons of fighters go through their entire careers. And I think he is, clearly going to be a good 5-round fighter. Should it go that far? And I think it probably will. And like you said, it's a competitive fight, but one which Moreno wins fairly clearly. And I think that the question is really, who's developed more since then?
Mm-hmm.
I think, worryingly enough, I suspect the answer might actually just be Brandon Moreno.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to talk about that last fight with Figueiredo here, I think, to talk about where he is and try to place that in context. But what do you mean by that? Why do you think he's developed more?
I think his ability to work in the pocket and his ability to slip and work in combinations and his ability to work the body, I think, are probably the two things that I think are really absent in the Kara France fight, which are, clearly present against Figueiredo.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, working the body and so on didn't work that effectively against Figueiredo, but I think that's just because he's a freak.
Yeah.
And I would expect it to work much, much more so against Kai Kara France, who is just, fortunately, against any of these guys, I think, just a little athletically outgunned.
Yeah, we have seen a couple fights where, even if it's not gone disastrously, where we've seen Kai Kara France kind of get just overtaxed by more athletic flyweights and wear down a bit later in the fight. I think that's a possibility. Defense is also the thing I would have pointed to.
Yeah.
Defense and it being Brandon Moreno, you really just see a slightly better version now of what you saw for the first time in that first Kai Kara France fight, where he mostly used his jab to draw things out as the fight went on, and then his defense was either to eat a shot and keep firing after Kara France was done, or to pull straight back and then dip right back in, and re-counter the counter. Now, same idea, but you actually get some slips. You get some blocks.
Yes.
I just think his vision in the pocket is much better. He's much more relaxed. And
yeah, I think that's at least partially where stuff like the body shots come from.
Yeah.
Because he's changing his levels in the middle of combinations, and
yeah, for sure.
There's a target available there.
That being said, do you think we saw any... I know other people have expressed this sort of theory. Do you think we saw any loss of durability in that last fight with Figueiredo from Moreno? Because no matter how much better his defense has gotten, he's going to need his durability. And Kara France, as I said, certainly tested it in the first fight. He dropped Moreno, I think, actually, in the first round, now that I recall. Like a flash knockdown, but he put him down on his fingertips. So is there any concern there?
I think there is there's a small concern, but it's not one that I think you necessarily expect to bear fruit this point.
Mm-hmm.
France, some performances notwithstanding. I mean, I don't know if I necessarily think of him as being a huge puncher. Also, it's just that Moreno, I think, has shown some dips in durability, but these are dips in durability from being, a chilly Max Holloway-esque, tank, into simply being insanely tough.
Yeah.
I mean, Figueiredo is one of the biggest pound-for-pound punchers in the UFC. He has an absolutely absurd knockdown rate for pretty much any fighter, let alone a flyweight.
He does.
He is essentially like the Ngannou of his division. So on the one hand, you can be like, yeah, it did look like finally we saw Brandon Moreno getting genuinely hurt. But on the other hand, you can just be like,
it's Figueiredo.
It's Figueiredo, and he was still broadly fine. It's sort of terrifying.
Yeah, he also hurt Figueiredo almost as many times, if not more. Yes. Just if less emphatically than the couple times he got hurt. And that you could also, again, this is something people have said, you could point to that as an evidence of Figueiredo's own durability declining. But I think it's also a factor of Moreno, just being more aware and more precise in the pocket, getting to the right range, and just landing a clean, accurate shot at exactly the right moment. There's a lot of that. He's just... The Kai Kara-France fight was the first time we saw this boxing out of Moreno, and he has continued to improve it. I think an interesting idea here is that he doesn't even really have to take the fight to Kai Kara-France, which is what he did, and it got him in trouble, and it created a storm that, by weathering it, he overwhelmed Kai. But is Kai Kara-France good coming forward? Not really. He's dangerous.
I think he genuinely has. I think he has improved there.
I agree. But I think it's mostly
that is where
just,
I think his improvements lie.
But it's mostly just willingness, isn't it? Like, he's not clean coming forward. It's more that he just, in his recent fights, we've seen that he can recognize when it's necessary to pursue the opponent, and it's usually with a blitz. We don't see sustained pressure. When he throws, we see him completely leaving his stance and just flying forward. And he's dangerous. I mean, I think he's a perfectly credible puncher.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like,
I know you weren't trying to undersell him. Just, he's not Figueiredo, but he's a dangerous puncher, no doubt. But, can Brandon probably just jab him and move around for a bit? And probably be pretty safe and win rounds? I think he probably can. He's also got his kicks. And a reach advantage.
And also, the last part about him being able to, a sort of piece of the puzzle of him being able to slip and work the body and so on, and, the level change which comes with that, is that...
the wrestling, absolutely.
He can wrestle as well.
Yeah. Let's not forget that. Which, by the way, drawing
quite significant in all the Figueiredo fights.
Yeah, and if he does decide to go with the approach of trying to draw Kara-France in, he's going to hit some clean takedowns on him. He's going to get the opportunities at the very least. So I don't know. What other ways? Why do you like the idea of Kai Kara-France as a 5-round fighter? What do you think are his chances if? Because from my perspective, I don't think it seems like a bad idea for Moreno to approach this like a 5-round fight and take it slow and let Kara-France make mistakes and just build the win slowly in the early rounds. Why do you like the idea of Kara-France in rounds 4 and 5? Because I'm not sure I trust him there.
I just think he's a crafty fighter.
Yeah.
I think he has a lot of depth of skill. I think a lot of what we've seen of his journey into the UFC at this point has been, in retrospect, it's looked like a fighter who is better in the gym than he is in the cage, finally figuring out how to kind of execute in the cage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, there's obviously the question that he's, I think, at a... He's at a disadvantage both physically and in terms of attritive weapons. I think he's going to be, there's more risk of him getting kicked to the legs. There's more risk of him getting punched to the body. I just think I think he's a crafty fighter who can be given, will blossom given time to show that in the cage. I think that's kind of what we've seen from his career.
Yeah, he watches his opponent. He studies them while he's fighting them. Yeah, and actually, you know what? Having said that, I like that point that you make about... is there a specific reason? Because I can say why it feels right to me, but why do you feel like this is Kara-France?
He feels like, in some ways, he feels like he's gone down the Drew Dober route, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where he couldn't synthesize trying to work a clever high volume game and trying to just go after people.
Yeah.
couldn't figure out which one he kind of wanted to. And now I feel like he has solved that problem.
He does just seem more confident, like he's more comfortable finally in the cage. And you can absolutely easily, like I feel I can easily picture Kara-France in the gym just like running after his training partners and just not really worrying too much about, am I putting myself out of position, when he feels that the distance and the timing is right and just fires. Yeah, and that is the thing. Like, you can't just fault somebody for form. Like, yeah, maybe he falls over himself going forward, but these days when he does it, he mostly lands. And there is still some nuance within that these shifting combinations are.
And let's be honest, the same is also quite true of Brandon Moreno.
Yeah. No doubt.
The end point of much of Brandon Moreno's like feints and shoulder feints and high guard drawing out of strikes and so on is a super ugly right hand.
That's true. He's not above a wing and a slapping hook, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Kai Kara-France does still, I mean, I've always been impressed since he first came to the UFC with his, his ability to fight in layers, that he's often a defense first fighter, that he's comfortable to slip in the pocket and come back with a shot. And you do still see that aspect of his game in how he comes forward, that it may look reckless, but frequently it's the second or the third punch is the one that lands clean, and it appears that is his intention, that he will burst forward, throwing away a punch, having determined that the opponent's going to put themselves out of position getting away and fall into the path of the second punch.
When he bursts forwards, he's often like doubling up.
Yeah.
He's throwing shots away, has ideas to he's covering the wildness as he steps in.
Yep. Moving his head as he goes. Tricky timing on the entry. And as you say, double right hands, double left hands, 3 shifts in a row where he's anticipating the opponent's movement. Yeah, it's not that bad. It's reckless, but there's a time for recklessness. It's fighting. I still have to favor Brandon Moreno. I think not only
you have to, unfortunately, really.
Yeah. Having an actual, albeit slight, reach advantage, but just functionally, I think being a better range fighter, I think gives him a lot of options. If he feels he needs to do what he did in the first fight, he can probably keep Kara-France on the back foot and get a lot of the same exchanges with now superior pocket fighting skills to follow up on those jab entries. And I think he can also afford to spend some long stretches of time just sort of making Kara-France commit, making Kara-France come after him, and meanwhile pecking at him with jabs and kicks. And the wrestling is just too... We know when Moreno gets somebody down who is like not Deiveson Figueiredo, even sometimes when it is Deiveson Figueiredo, Moreno in top position is a scary fighter. And Kara-France, guts. He'll survive, but he will also just like give up his back and drop an entire round. So, gotta pick Brandon.
Yeah, he has. So that's the thing, is that Kara-France feels like he has incredibly high possibility of just of competing. But, he has to walk such a narrow path to win the fight.
Right. Because
he's less diverse on the feet. He's mostly just going to be having to do it with boxing.
Yep.
He's at more risk of attrition. He doesn't work the body in the same way. He doesn't work the legs in the same way.
Yeah.
He has to deal with the takedown threat, whereas Moreno almost certainly doesn't. And he's, as you said, I think he's a slightly smaller fighter.
Yeah.
Dealing with a functional reach disadvantage, whether or not that's true or not. That's how the fight looked and played out.
His wingspan is an inch shorter, but he is also 2 inches shorter in height and simply isn't as straight a puncher. So there's a couple factors that, it's going to feel like Moreno has a couple inches of reach on him, I think.
And, Kai Kara-France he's very durable. I was trying to think about this just now. Have I ever seen Kai Kara France like badly hurt? Maybe against Royval. Did he get hurt before
he got dropped. That fight? He did, yeah. He got dropped, and then he dropped Royval right back, and then he got dropped again with a spinning elbow, if I recall correctly. Moreno did buzz him several times, but I don't think he dropped him once. I could double check the stats on that, but I'm pretty sure he didn't. Let's take a cursory view of UFC stats. Any knockdowns?
I mean, regardless of let's find that out. But so just regardless of that, I think he's not as tough as Brandon Moreno is. I think that's
you got to assume, right?
Because very, very, very few people are.
Yeah. Not as tough, but also just not as fast and not as... The variety does feel like a big factor here. Just having the option. It's like a Bisping Rockhold kind of thing, except Moreno's better than Rockhold. Where, like, is it possible? Yes. But he's going to have to make such an incredible series of correct decisions and so few mistakes, or get really lucky in that Moreno fails to capitalize on the mistakes he does make. It's a narrow path to walk. To answer the earlier,
it would have to be, yes, he would have to do it many times, or Brandon Moreno's durability would have had to have disintegrated.
Yes, which is possible.
But yes, none of it seems particularly likely.
Yeah, I'm not going to pick it till I see it. Just on the basis that, Davis and Figueiredo, of all people, managed to hurt him a couple times. And not even badly, really. Like, he dropped him hard and then he was right back in the fight. That's more of the typical of Brandon Moreno, I think, than any concerns about his durability. He was dropped twice by Brandon Royval, whom he also dropped once. I think most of those happened in the span of like 45 seconds. And then the only other knockdown he's had in the UFC, and this is wild, Elias Garcia, in his UFC debut, is credited with one knockdown. In a fight in which Kara France also knocked him down and outlanded him 86-16. So there's some freak flash knockdown that I have completely wiped from my memory in that fight, apparently. I'm going to be curious to watch that after this and find out what it looks like. But yeah, very tough. It's going to be a really fun fight, I think, no matter what. We know Kara France is going to be able to compete. But there are phases of the fight where I don't expect him to be able to compete. And that, along with all the little tactical advantages it looks like Moreno has in the feet, is more than enough reason to pick Moreno.
I have to.
Yep. All right, one more break then. When we come back, we may only have time for one more fight, and thank God there's more flyweights on this card. Alexandre Pantoja versus Alex Perez. A very interesting fight, which I have a strange feeling has been booked at least once before. We're going to talk about that after this. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are still struggling to wrap our heads around this next matchup, Alexandre Pantoja versus Alex Perez. And perhaps part of the reason that we've struggled to comprehend the dynamics of this matchup is that Phil just spent about 25 minutes recapping the plot of the film Predators to me. Which sounds...
I'm not even sure if it's called Predators, but it's the really bad one.
The Shane Black one.
Yeah.
Which I even though I know you've told me about it before, I still somehow haven't heard of it. Pantoja Perez. The other thing that makes this difficult for me in particular to suss out. I mean, I'm bad at picking fights in general. I can pick up on the dynamics, but like identifying which ones are going to be key, not always good at that. And also being able to project through like a fighter's ability to do something versus their potential to do something versus their actual ability to do it live. That's always a thing. The problem here, and why I really hate trying to pick this fight with any confidence, is that Alex Perez has not fought at all since that almost instantaneous loss to Deiveson Figueiredo in 2020. Since then, he has had a fight booked 6 times. I say a fight. He's in fact had 2 fights booked 6 times in total. He was supposed to fight Matt Schnell on 4 different occasions. And mixed in there, he had 2 bookings with Askar Askarov, both of which also fell through. Those are, by the way, 6 of the 9 total fights Perez has had canceled in his relatively short UFC tenure. I mean, starting in 2019, this was a pattern that emerged. Do we know what's the actual reason for all these pullouts? I think Perez has gotten injured a few times. I can't recall if Schnell got injured in any of those bookings. I think he had COVID, Perez did.
Yeah, I don't actually know. I mean, I thought it was that he got injured. And it also makes sense that, you know, you'd have to be incredibly snake bit to have the other guys randomly get injured every time you get booked for a fight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it makes it really hard to predict. I mean, that's one of the 2 dynamics, I think, which makes it hard to predict.
Injuries and weight issues. He's had difficulty with his weight cuts as well, which could easily be tied to...
He is massive.
He is. And that could be tied to the injuries as well.
Yeah. I mean, at least one of these was Schnell withdrawing. One of them was one of them was Perez coming in overweight and refusing to try again.
Oh.
Some of them, I think, are undisclosed. But, yeah, it doesn't look good, basically. You're saying that either he's too big for the weight class and needs an incredible confluence of occurrences to actually make it to a fight, or he's just injury prone, which is pretty much a long-term career death sentence. I think the other thing which makes this... Sorry?
To be fair, a lot of these are also a weird snake bit thing where both the Askarov bookings, it was Askarov who withdrew. And then 2 of the Matt Schnell ones, it was Matt Schnell, I think, who had the issue. So who knows? But the point is, it's been 2 years since his last fight, which was a crushing defeat, and he has had issues since then, and God knows how he's going to look. It just adds an unwanted X factor to breaking this fight down.
I mean, that's the other thing which makes it difficult to pick his fights, which is that he doesn't have competitive fights.
Yeah.
He either absolutely steamrolls his opponent or he gets wiped out.
It's true.
And that makes it a very difficult question to ask against someone like Alexandre Pantoja. Because if there is one thing which Pantoja is, it is insanely tough and difficult to get out of there in almost any phase.
Yeah.
You just do not finish Pantoja.
Pretty much. And
to be honest, you don't even have easy fights against Pantoja.
No, literally no one does.
It's, you know, he's probably not as skilled as Jussier Formiga, but he's more athletic, he's physically tougher, and he's stronger.
Yeah. And in some areas, I mean, he is an incredibly skilled grappler. There's no denying that. There is one phase at which Pantoja is technically very good and also insanely scrappy, because even if he does have some kind of wrestling disadvantage here, which I suspect he might, of course, depending on how Perez looks, he is unbelievable on the ground. I mean, there's a sequence in his fight with Askar Askarov, which is also very competitive, where Askarov, see if I can recall it having just looked at it. Askarov takes him down, I think with like a rear waist cinch, like he dumps him from a body lock. And he's got Pantoja's back, and then Pantoja slips out of that and like goes to his back, so his head is between Askarov's legs. And then from that position, he uses his insteps, like elevators, butterfly hooks, and floats the man who has just taken him down into back mount from beneath him. He just sort of elevates him and scoots him down, and suddenly he's got a body triangle on Askarov. He is an insanely, and of course we don't even need to mention the incredible defense and back takes against Brandon Royval and everyone else. Against anyone, Pantoja is a master with back takes from virtually any position. And then just otherwise, as you said, just unbelievably scrappy. Like, I mentioned a possible wrestling disadvantage. I think depending on how Perez looks after all this time, you have to assume there will be one. Askarov was able to take Pantoja down several times and mat return him. This just to please Daniel Cormier with the definition of what's a real takedown. Take him down and mat return him multiple other times, control him with wrestling, and Perez is probably capable of doing that. He's really big and strong. He's got a variety of takedowns he likes to go to. He's good single leg, good body locks. Half the time he takes them down, he'll just bear hug them and just lift them off their feet and set them on their ass. But Pantoja's really strong. He's a really good scrambler. He doesn't get tired easily. It's difficult to project just that into a Perez win. And then otherwise on the feet, Pantoja is a guy who sort of replicates craft with his scrappiness. Like, is Pantoja a good counterpuncher? No. But he's a damn effective counterpuncher. Because when you hit him, he hits you back. And he hits hard. Is he a good technical striker? No, but he'll work the body and he'll work the legs. There's enough variety there. He puts combinations together, and he's just fucking fearless. So I almost feel completely beholden to pick Pantoja, both for the fact that I don't feel I can trust Perez very much at this point, but also the thing you pointed to before, that for the most part, Perez either wipes the floor with his opponent and has it all his way from the beginning, or it's remotely competitive and then he quickly loses. I will say the exception to that is his fight with Jussier Formiga, which was reasonably competitive, actually. And it was, the fact that he was putting money in the bank with low kicks the entire time. But, excuse me, but Formiga was, counterpunching him and landing clean shots up to that point. He just couldn't stand the punishment. But, it was like an aging Formiga who was like more fragile, and I just don't see that happening to Pantoja. Even if he gets hurt, he's not going to fold. He's going to keep grappling. So is there any reason to pick Perez?
Perez was much bigger than Formiga.
That too, yeah.
It did look like there wasn't really a point at which he was confident he couldn't physically bully Formiga.
Yeah.
So, the thing which I find the most kind of perplexing about Perez is that so much to like about his game.
Mm-hmm.
He builds his offense off his jab and low kicks. He can counterpunch. That was part of what made the Formiga fight work for him, is that he was able to low kick Formiga when he jabbed, but he was also able to counterpunch Formiga when Formiga tried to punch him to take away his low kicks.
Yeah.
He is a well-constructed fighter. As you said, he has an array of takedowns. He's physically imposing for the division. There's tons to like about what you see from him, and there's so little that you get to see from him that you can look at things like the Figueiredo fight, and you can say, well, that's just, that's a size and athleticism bully coming up against someone who's also massive and athletic and just kind of giving up. Could also just be it also could just be someone getting caught.
Yeah.
The Benavidez and Figueiredo fights might just be, the kind of stuff that just happens every now and again.
Right.
That's the thing, you cannot really tell with Alex Perez whether he is because those finishes were so rapid. Can't tell whether he's really like folding out there or whether it's just, he's kind of like a Rob Font kind of guy who's just getting overwhelmed in the moment.
Yeah, just getting caught by very dangerous fighters.
So, I mean, I think that's really the reason that you might want to pick Alex Perez. But as you said, I mean, I think I just have to pick Pantoja.
You have to.
He's just athletic and super scrappy, and Alex Perez has only really beaten people that he has major physical advantages over at this point.
Right.
And, that Royval fight answered any questions I might have had about whether Pantoja could be falling off.
Yeah.
Because that was a torrid pace, and it was Royval's own pace, and Pantoja just outworked him in it.
Yeah.
Still has never, had his chin cracked. He's outfought Brandon Moreno.
Yep.
So yeah, I got to pick him.
Outfought Brandon Moreno, fought tooth and nail for 3 rounds with Figueiredo, the guy who easily finished Perez.
I will say that fight was quite competitive, and maybe Perez was winning it before that ground exchange, which got him finished. But
yeah,
it's in the larger picture of his career.
There is a question. Yeah, how does we've yet to see Perez end up in trouble and recover and win, or even recover and drag the fight out. It's usually
because that Formiga fight was competitive.
Yeah,
there was no was never a point where you were like, oh my god, Alex Perez, how are you going to come back from this kind of thing?
Absolutely not. Yeah, and Pantoja, just to put the capper on it, is himself a very physical fighter. He's if I talk about his wrestling deficiencies, he still out wrestles, at least at points, almost everyone he fights because he's really strong and determined to get takedowns. So he usually just gets a bent back double leg by just wrenching people off their feet and throwing them down. And he's powerful, and he's got a really quick trigger, and he's not technically good on the feet really, but he's accurate. He's fearless. His eyes are open. His timing is great. He has no qualms about taking a shot to give one back. So it reads as good striking because it's effective. 100% picking Pantoja. Even if I didn't have the additional X factors of what's Perez going to look like after all this time, I would still, I think, have to pick Pantoja because I trust him. And that'll do it, I think, for this week's episode of Heavy Hands. UFC 277. Looking good. Very, very excited for that main event, Phil. I gotta be honest. I've said it so many times already, but it bears repeating. There is no other great fight that is great in this exact way.
It is unique. Yeah.
It's truly unique, and that is something worth celebrating. God, I hope it's not bad. I really hope it's not bad.
Well, you hope it's bad in the right ways.
Well, yeah. I hope it's not boring. But yeah, a very, very interesting card and guaranteed to be interesting to talk about afterwards, even if it is boring. That's going to be something to complain about, and God knows we're good at that. So we will talk to you guys next week when is there another card coming up?
Santos versus Hill is the next card, but is that... Yes, that is next week.
That one does not look good, if I recall correctly.
No.
Our first, finally, after all this glut of incredibly stacked cards, we just get to something where...
Finally, they're to the light heavyweights, basically.
Yeah, and it's not just the main event. The best fight on the card is Vicente Luque, Jeff Neal, which, cool. And then the rest of the main card is Shamil Gamzatov versus Misha Serkinov and Augusto Sakai versus Sergey Spivak. There's a Sam Alvey fight in the featured prelim slot. Granted, Sam Alvey versus Oleg Sajak could be fun.
Sam Alvey, why is he still here?
Yeah, Terrence McKinney, he's fighting Eric Gonzalez, Jason Witt, Josh Quinlan. Who gives a shit? Well, I guess we needed to have a bad one at some point. So look forward to that next week. We're almost certainly going to get to do my favorite thing, which is to spend the bulk of the main episode recapping rather than having to make predictions, which turn out to be incorrect in so many various and comical ways. On that note, I will remind you once again to check out our Patreon, where we will be talking about Curtis Blaze versus Tom Aspinall, Chris Curtis versus Jack Hermanson, and anything else that wasn't just wall install clinching from last weekend's card in London. Until then, by the way, that's $3. So you know. Am I crazy, Phil?
No.
They can afford $3. I mean, Jesus Christ.
I mean, I hope they can.
That's true. If you can't, then there's no pressure. Steal it if you can't afford $3. But if you can, and I catch you stealing it, that's it. All right? I will be very upset about you on Twitter or something. Find Phil on Twitter, by the way, at Greg Jackson. Find me at Boxing Bush. And until next week, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.
Find out about people just starving to death in the streets. You're gonna look at them and they're gonna be like, well, at least their Heavy Hands Patreon subscription was paid up.
Yeah, you know what? To be fair to our listeners, a fair few of them have probably become destitute by making bets based on my fight picks.
I'll get them to spend, the last things they need. Stay alive. So they can hear us talking about how badly we got Chris Curtis versus Jack Hermanson wrong.
Okay, let's do that then.